Hey guys, just back with the next tutorial for C Sharp. So I'm using Visual Studio today. I've changed the theme around a bit, so hopefully you guys can see the different windows that I have here. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. If you still have the Hello World project open from the last tutorial, all you have to do is find the Solutions Explorer. So here's a Solutions Explorer at the top. I've dragged it there, so all you have to do is take the window and drag it to the top bar, and it should go there. I changed it because my recorder doesn't catch the side windows, so it has to be on the main window. So if you put it there, you should be able to do exactly what I'm doing. So to get to the code, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is our so this form1.cs is it's the C# file, so all the C# files will be called .cs. They'll have a file extension .cs. This is the design tab, whatever they call it. All you have to do, so to get to this code, we'll talk about what this stuff is. Why is that so far away? Just the way, okay, that's just the way it is. Okay, so all you have to do is find the Solutions Explorer. Does this get any bigger? No, the text doesn't get bigger, I don't think. Okay, so click on form1.cs, right click it, and hopefully you can see this. If you can't, just right click it and then click the View Code tab. Or it says you can hit F7. So that should pull up this window here. You should have this code. So we'll talk about some of this stuff. What a namespace is, and then we'll review classes. This stuff we'll get into more in detail later on. We'll just talk about it. So let's just talk about the different, the meaning of the different statements that we can see here. So at the top we have a namespace. So a namespace is a container that holds classes. It also, I have a better definition. We can look at that as well. I believe I have a better definition somewhere on here from the doc somewhere or something. So a namespace, okay, yeah, so this is from the Microsoft docs, I believe. This is the actual definition from the Microsoft docs. So a namespace, oh, it's exactly the same. I thought I had a better definition here. Okay, here, nope. I thought I had a better definition. Okay, so that's okay. So we'll just go with this definition for now. So you can just remember, we'll probably get more into it later on. But a namespace is just a container that holds classes. So it holds, I believe, classes that are grouped together, kind of similar classes. So in this case, we just called our namespace Hello World. So we'll move on to this, the keyword class. So a class is a container that holds methods, for example. So a partial class, we'll get into it later on, but it's kind of classes you can create from different files. It's a little confusing. It's kind of like a topic that's just unique to C. So we'll talk about that. So this public keyword here means that it's accessible from other files. We'll talk about all that later on. So for example, you can have private, perhaps protected as well. Private kind of makes your classes more secure, and you can make things more secure. Other files can't access them, stuff like that. So we'll talk about that later. We also have, so here we have form1. So that's the name of our class. Form1 is the name of our class. We'll talk about this later on. This is also in C#. C++. We'll be learning about that stuff later, but we'll be talking about this later. This colon just means it inherits from form. So inheritance, that's if you're just learning C#, if C#'s your first language, then that's not going to make too much sense. But you can just think of it like form1 is high up in the hierarchy, and below it, actually, no, other way around. So form's at the top of the hierarchy. You can think of like a food chain. And then you can say, okay, well, we have a shark at the top of the food chain, and then below the shark we have a fish. So the shark eats the fish. So basically the fish come from the shark, or the fish kind of, what's a better example? Okay, if we have a dandelion, let's say form is a dandelion, and so the wind blows, and then seeds fly around. So let's say form1 is a seed, so we can say that form1 came from the dandelion. That's what it means. It inherits from. That's the real definition means is that form1 inherits from the dandelion, or in this case form1 inherits from form. So form's you can think of form as like the master class or something. It's like it's the bigger class. Form1's a subclass, so form1 is inheriting from the master class or the bigger class. So form1 is a subclass, so its form is higher in the hierarchy, if that makes sense. So form1 is really the dandelion seed, where the dandelion is form, and the seed is form1. So the seed comes from the dandelion, so form1 comes from the dandelion. And when that happens, it inherits all of its properties, its methods, its variables, and all that. So we'll talk about that later on. It's kind of advanced stuff, so we'll talk about that later on. So the form1 here, we're calling form1 with public. When we call the class name with a keyword such as public, that just means that it's the constructor, so the constructor sets up objects. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, we haven't talked about this since Java, because C and Python have been, for at least for the Python that we've done so far, has been non-object oriented, just procedural, which means there's no objects. So now C# is it's object oriented. So C# is object oriented, and the framework we'll be using is .NET. So we'll be talking about that later on. So initialize component, it's just a method. Do I have a definition here somewhere? I can get one. Let me just pull up some Microsoft Docs on my other screen here. So we have initialize components, or if you're confused about what it means, you can also Google it. So you can just type in initialize component C# or docs, C# docs. So it says here that the initialize component, which is a method in Visual Studio C#.net. So basically it's a method from C#.net. So the method is automatically created. So it's a method that is automatically created and managed by the Windows Forms designer, and it defines everything you see on this form, so it's a little confusing. So let me just pull up the docs here. Where's the actual docs definition? Okay, so when you type this on Google, you should type in Microsoft Docs. So I just typed in initialize component C#. Let me type in C#, Microsoft Docs. Try that. Getting a few different, not the exact I'm getting it connected to another object or something. It's not telling me it's not telling me what the exact. So it seems like it can be used with different objects. I'm not getting an exact definition here. So I have another definition from another website, so let's try that. So we have another definition here. So initialize component is a method automatically written for you by the form designer when you create/change your forms. Every form, such as form1.cs, which is what we have, has a designer file, for example, form1.designer.cs, that contains the initialize component method. The override of the generic form.dispose, we'll talk about that later, and the declaration of all your user interface objects like buttons, text boxes, labels, and the forms itself. So basically that's a little confusing. So the initialize component method contains the code that creates and initializes the user interface objects dragged on the form surface with the values provided by you, the programmer. So you're the programmer using the property grid of the form designer. So it says, due to this fact, do not ever try to interact with the form or the controls before the call to initialize component. So basically, initialize component sets up your graphical user interface. I think that's what they're getting at. So you can think of, for example, where did it go? This is our component here. It basically sets up the objects. Like, the definition is very bad. I can't even find one on the docs. Hopefully we will come back to this later, or I can find a definition for a later video, a better one from the docs. I'll have to look around. Actually, we'll just probably come back. We're probably going to learn about it later on again, so don't worry about that. So basically, the form1 calls a constructor, initialize component. Is there a definition here? There is a definition here. Okay, so it says, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it says the IntelliSense is showing something. So it says required method for designer support. Do not modify the contents of this method with the code editor. Can I right click that? Peak definition. Does not tell me. Nope. Okay, so it's telling me the definition of the code. Can I get some docs for that? What do we say the way to get the docs was? There was a special way. There's a keyboard shortcut to get to the docs. I think it was MSDM or something. I forgot. There's a keyword. Let me just see if I can pull that up on another device here, so if I can just get any better definition. Apologize for that, so let's just try to see if we can get anything better than there. Where's the method? Let's just go with MSDM C# docs initialize component. So C#.net on Windows Forms. Yeah, I'm not really getting a good definition on here. So it pretty much sets up the designer. I think it basically sets up your GUI. So let's just go with that. We'll come back to it later on. So after we have that's pretty much it. We'll talk about more methods and stuff later on. We'll be getting into writing our own code. So this was the generated code that we have for our form. Yeah, we should be continuing on to this part now. Okay, so we've talked about what we have here. So we have the namespace, everything. So everything in the code, just back to the code, we have everything is in square brackets. So you have to put the namespace, then open the square brackets, and inside the square brackets of the namespace we put the public partial class, where form1 inherits from form. We open those square brackets and we open public form1. That's the constructor. We open square brackets, and then we'll probably leave that there. When we open the next method, we'll start from there. We'll get into that pretty soon. Okay, so we have let's just move on to the next part. Okay, so let's start to add our own code. So we have our project set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this box to say click me, and when we click it, another window will pop up. So we will then start with that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working with a message box control. So a message box is a small window, sometimes referred to as a dialog box, that displays a message. Kind of like a yes. So when you see a window that says like yes or no, exit or something like that, you've seen them on like a PC or a Mac. So that's what we will create. You'll see that it's pretty easy to make those. Most of it's already coded in. You just have to kind of call the code and design it the way you want. So we will have a dialog box that says thanks for clicking the button. We're going to have something called an event handler that's going to handle the mouse click event. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the JavaFX tutorial, but it's basically the exact same thing. And the syntax of C# is almost the exact same as well, so that's good. This C# Java syntax is actually really good. C# doesn't have pointers, I believe, so that makes it even better than C++. So I believe Microsoft took C++ and made C# and made it actually efficient, because C++ and C they have a lot of memory problems. That's why a lot of people avoid trying to use them. Even though C++ is still used in a lot of things, such as automobile programming and game design and stuff like that. Even Windows still uses it and stuff like that, so we'll talk about it later on. So we'll have, so the .net framework provides a method named messagebox.show, so we'll be calling that method to show the message box after we click. We'll put a string inside we'll call the method messagebox.show. We'll have a string that will print a string to the user when we click the button in a window. So we will have an event handler. So we have some stuff at the top. Is it not showing all that? Okay, so there should be some more code here at the top. That's what I want. It's not showing me these. So there should be a bunch of libraries at the top, which is not showing me all the code. Okay, so that's not helping. What is this? How can I show this? Okay, so really what we have is this here. This is what we have. So above this code, it's just kind of coded in. It's not, usually you just put it on the top, and we just need using. It might be something to do with the new .NET that we're using. Maybe we should have went with .NET 5. But I don't really want this, so let's try to get out of, that's kind of a lot of things to type, but we'll try that. So we can use a comment. So let's go to that file. Sorry, it's not used to this, so we'll have, where is it taking me? Okay, so now it's saying so let's so we can do it. We can use a comment here. So let's comment all this out. So these two slashes is the two backslashes I think are a comment. So we can comment like this, or we could have done a star comment all the way. We'll talk about that later. So what we'll do is we'll actually just type those in. So let's see if we can use this same kind of old .NET style to basically use these packages. So we'll say, or access these classes. So we'll say using system. We'll say using systems dot. So let me just comment this out for a sec. So let me try running this. What is all this? I don't think it worked because nothing came up. The button's frozen out or blanked out. What's the shortcut for that? Apologize. So there we go. Okay, so it actually did work. I'm not sure if you guys could see that, but a button popped up. Probably not, because it's in a separate window, so my recorder won't catch it. Just the way the Windows recorder is. So it still works. Somehow the packages are still being let in. So let's just go with typing these out, because we have to use this stuff anyways. So usually you would, I'm not sure if this is just part of the new .NET 7, or is that just something to do with Visual Studio Code, but usually you have to say, okay, we want to say using system. They want to say using system dot. So some stuff came up, IntelliSense is giving us some choices, so we can say using system dot collections dot generic. Does this get any bigger? Yeah, it does. Okay, so here we'll say using system. So these are just basically classes that we need to run our GUI. So we have to include these. These are common things. We'll be using them almost all the time, so you'll get used to this. So using system dot, we'll say component model. These are kind of hard to remember, to be honest. Your professor probably won't ask you all of these if you're taking a university class. So using system dot I'm just at a normal school though, I'm not like at an Ivy League school, so maybe at an Ivy League institution they might try to Ivy League you. into knowing all the, memorizing all these. So using system.data, using system.drawing, using system dot. So yeah, so the using keyword. I don't think we talked about that. Insert definition here. No. Okay, so let me just pull up a definition from some kind of docs here. So we'll say using C# definition. So the using keyword has two major uses. The using statement defines a scope at the end of which an object will be disposed. So I don't think it's that definition. So the next definition is the using directive creates an alias for a namespace or imports types defined in other namespaces. So basically we're importing data from other namespaces in this case. So apologize if I said class. So we're actually using data from these namespaces. So system is a namespace. I believe drawing is the class. So you can think of a namespace as kind of like the hierarchy thing again. So namespace is at the very top of the hierarchy. It's like the biggest possible thing in C#. It's even bigger than a class. Most languages just have a class. So C# has something bigger than a class, which is a namespace where you can put similar classes. Pretty much. So namespace is a new keyword completely. I believe it might actually be unique to C#. Completely unique. For example, Java only has classes. It doesn't get any bigger than that. Pretty much that's it. So in Microsoft C# we have namespace is a bigger. It's like a massive super class, but it's not a class. It's like a place. It's a container to store classes. So it's the biggest possible keyword. You can think of that. So using the using keyword creates an alias for a namespace or imports types defined in other namespaces. That's what it does. So we'll go back to basically importing these namespaces with the using keyword. So we'll say system.linq then using system.text using system. And system has to have a capital, using doesn't, if you guys notice that. So using, then system dot text, and then using system dot threading dot tasks. And finally the last one, using system dot windows dot forms. Last one's easy to remember. The very top one's easy to remember. The rest of them are probably kind of hard. Maybe this third one you might get to. The rest are probably kind of hard. So just if you type them out every time, you'll probably remember some of them. Maybe most of them after a while. So we'll try to type them out. Usually I do. We may switch over to Rider from JetBrains. I'll probably test it out and see which one's better. I'm liking the colors here though. It's not bad. These are like the standard Visual Studio colors from even way back in the day. But there's not many more colors than this. It's mostly just blue and white. May have some kind of cream color here. We may try Rider later on and see if it's a little bit better for learning. Because typing these in is good for learning, because you get to learn about the namespaces and the classes and all that. Okay, so moving on to, this is starting to get a little bit long, but we'll just continue on. So we have the code set up. So we have a button. This is there. Sorry, I'm just wondering if there's a tutorial here. Okay, I don't think there is. So I'll just have to kind of play around with it. So what we really have to do here is basically we're gonna click on our button. So you can do this from the properties window. You can do it from scratch. So well, we can take this code and move it back up. Public partial class, so we have our form 1, so we're working in form 1. We're going to be working in, so this is actually probably nothing. Whoops. Where is our display message? Okay, this is our button here. We have our, where did the properties go? Here we go. Properties. Message button 1. Okay, so let's try this. Let's not even mess with the properties. You can do this from the properties. You can. Maybe we should actually, because it's a good idea to. The problem is on the Microsoft, in this tutorial here, there's no. They kind of just talked about this. So we have. Let's just step back for a sec. Okay. So what we want to do is basically have a. So last time we started this, we named the button my button or message button in our GUI. In our window here, we have. Hopefully, you guys can see that. Text is going to be small, but it says display message. We have a window with a button. I may want to just zoom in on your device if you can. That's okay. So we have a big button there. So basically, that's what we did last time. So what we're gonna do is when we have so when the user clicks the button, we're gonna have to write a special type of method known as an event handler. So an event handler is a method that executes when a specific event takes place while an application is running. So it's a little bit of a tricky definition. Just try to remember it. So an event handler is a method that executes when a specific event takes place. So an event handler is a method that executes when a specific event takes place, such as a mouse click, while an application is running. So a mouse click is just you take your mouse and click, that's an event. So if we take our mouse, not just anywhere though, it has to be on the GUI. So this is our GUI, this is a form, which is a window. So we have our button in the middle, right? So I'm going to take the mouse, click it, that generates a click event. But you don't know that, like a normal Windows or a normal computer user, whether on Mac, because a Mac has a click event as well, or on a phone, you have a touch event. I think that's what they call it. They call it a touch event. I forgot. Don't worry, I'll be doing the Android videos sometime soon. I'll be uploading them. I have about 200 videos to upload, so just be patient. You'll get the videos. Apologize for that. So we have basically the click event being generated when we click the button. So now we're going to write the event handler, which is pretty simple because it takes the same parameters almost every time, or at least it takes some of the same parameters every time. So we can do this two ways. So we'll just go with the designer way first. So to create the event handler, you double click the My button control in the designer. So you just take this. So we're in the designer now. Double click the My button control. So the button control. Sorry, we think we called it message button. So just take, if you're following along from the rest of the series, just continue where you left off in the Hello World project that we have. So just take them, we call this My button 1, I think. Just double click it and it should pop up with this. So we can write this out again. We can comment it out. So we'll talk about everything in here soon. We're gonna have to learn about the different types and stuff, so we'll get into that. So what we have here is another keyword to basically we'll talk about private and public with the Microsoft definition later on, but basically it's a way to access data. Private is more secure than public. We'll talk about that later on, so just type it out for now. Don't worry, we'll get into the actual definition after. So private, so void means, you should know if you've been watching the other tutorials, other languages. If you don't, well, I guess everyone might not. So void just means that this method doesn't return a type. So for example, we could return an int, which means that this method returns a number. We could return a string, which means this method returns a string, which is like, this is a string. Hello is a string because it's in these quotes, which means it's a string literal. So string, we could return an int, which is like a number such as 5. And a float is a number that's like a decimal number such as 1.2. But in this case, void means no type. So void just means it's not a string, it's not a number, it's nothing. It just means that it's not going to return anything. This method doesn't return anything. So here we're going to call our, we just click on the form1.cs file, which is a .c file. Okay, what happened to our button? Something happened when I commented that out. I don't think it liked that actually. Okay, let's just step back here for a sec. So if I uncomment this, you're gonna change? No. Where did our GUI go? Okay, so it looks like since we started some of it with some of the code with the designer window by clicking and stuff. When I commented out, it got looks like it got confused because it's missing our button. So let's just try to maybe go back here. Let me Control Z this stuff. You might have to do the same. I didn't know it was going to do that. I thought it was just going to pop back up. But maybe something just special to Visual Studio, it didn't like that. So we go with that. There we go. Okay, so we have that. We could actually just type it out in comments as well. So we have private. We talked about that. Void. So we have here, what I was getting at before is we have the name of our control. So the name of our control is we're trying to access the button. So if I click the form and then click, where's the properties? Okay. Properties is here. We have form1, that's the name or identifier. So basically in C#, they call a variable also an identifier. I think in a lot of the C's. C# and C++ at least. I believe they're both called an identifier. Basically an identifier is just a variable. So we have that. So it's called form 1. So if I go back to the code, we have message button 1. Okay, so what's message button 1? I'm gonna get the bounding box up. I'm gonna click on the button to get the bounding box up. Then we will have, I'll go back to the properties, go back to the top, we'll see that we have the name, message button 1 right there. Message button 1 at the very top, which is the under the control binding, so it's the value of the name of the button basically. So if that makes sense, it's really of the variable message button 1. It's kind of being we're gonna access so it's accessing, so this isn't the exact name of our control. This is the name of our method. So we're saying, okay, we don't really need this identifier. In this case, it's referencing the identifier, but not directly. So if that makes sense, where did it go? It's referencing message button 1. We could have called this message the awesome message button 1 avocado underscore click. We could have named it whatever, but in this case we just wanted to make sure that we knew what it was referencing, so we said, okay, we want to say what it's referencing indirectly, which I mean what I mean by that is it's not like this, it has some code, it's not really connected to anything. We could have named it anything, so it's not like important like private void or object sender event args. E is similar. We could have named E anything. We could have named, well, I think sender is built in, but E, we could have named this anything. We'll talk about that in a sec. Actually, we could have named sender anything as well. So sender or E, we could have named like the best sender banana. E, we could have called it like blueberry sausage, something, anything. Same with this. Message button 1 underscore click. So we're referencing the button indirectly. We're trying to refer to it. That's why we included message button 1. So hopefully that makes sense. So we'll just continue on. So we have message button 1. That's just the name of our method, which is going to do something. In this case, it's going to handle the click event. So here we have object. We'll talk about that later. Sender. So these are parameters. So this method is going to take 2 parameters. It takes an object sender and an event args E. So we'll talk about that later on. Don't worry about that right now. So I'll have to pull up those definitions. It's going to take some time. So we will talk about that pretty soon. Don't worry about it. Actually, okay, let's just do it. We're getting into an hour now, so let's. It's not an hour yet, so we still have some time. So we have basically so object. So we'll go. If you want to find out what these mean, like me, if you're stuck. Any language you can just have, for example, object will go with object keyword in C# that comes up. So the object keyword represents the system.object type. I'm not gonna lie, C#'s kind of advanced because of we've seen similar, like if you guys have seen the tutorial on Java FX, we have almost the exact same thing. But if you're just starting out as a language, C#'s your first language, it's going to be fun, but it's going to be hard because you're not going to understand some of what these things are. But these are just 2 parameters because we haven't talked about a lot of stuff yet, so we're going to be getting into obviously a lot more topics. I'm just kind of kind of just introducing you to them, so it's going to be confusing at first. So basically, the system.object type, which is the root type in the C# class hierarchy. So this keyword is often used when there is no way to identify the object type at compile time, which happens in various interoperability scenarios. So that's kind of a hard definition. So Microsoft has some docs here. So object, okay, this might be a better definition. So the object type is an alias for system.object in .net. In the unified type system of C#, so it's an alias for system, so capital S system.O object in .net. So in the unified type system of C#, all types predefined and user-defined reference types and value types inherit directly or indirectly from system.object. So you can think of it kind of similar to, okay, so it's an object that belongs to the namespace system. Does that make sense? Kind of confusing. We have system so think of, we have this big hierarchy. At the top we have system. Actually, sorry, we have namespace. Yeah, so then we can have an arrow point. Okay, how can I do this here? So let's just try to comment this. We have so top of the hierarchy. How do you spell hierarchy? So we have top of the hierarchy, we have namespace. So that's that's the biggest thing possible. In C#. So it's the biggest thing possible in C#. So namespace. Let's say so namespace is the biggest thing possible in C#. Then we have objects. So we have classes. So object basically is a class of C#. Whoops. Pretty sure that's the definition here. So we have classes. So namespace, created a namespace called system. Should be. So let's just go with let's just try this, using system.object. Capital O. No. Actually it might, yeah, there might be something here. No, it's not liking that. It should be system.object using system. It's coming up on the forums. Sorry, on the docs. Using system.object. No. Okay, so it's a class. It's a class in C#, but it's not. Perhaps it's a private class. So it's not letting me access it. But basically, so just continuing on with the definition, is that we have a namespace, a class, and then we have a class which is basically object. So you can assign values of any type to the variables of type object. An object variable can be assigned to its default value using the literal null. So the object type, it's a little confusing. It's basically a type. So it's basically an object type that comes from a class. Is derived from it. So this is all confusing probably if you're just starting out with programming, especially if C#'s your first language. But don't worry, we're gonna by the end of the series you're gonna know all of this stuff. So don't worry. So object type that is derived from so it's an object type that is derived from a class, basically. Which comes from namespace. So which probably comes from system, which comes from namespace. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a little confusing. So we will continue on. So we have basically we're creating an object named sender, and we have an event args. I'll have to get the definition for event args as well. So event args C# docs. So it's a class. So it represents the base class for classes that contain event data, and provides a value to use for events that do not include event data. So I'm not going to type it out. Actually, I could type it out. So we have event args is a class. So event args is the base class for classes that contain event data. So it's a big class. So it's up there in the hierarchy, pretty close to the top. So classes that contain event data and provide a value to use for events that do not include event data. So it represents the base class for classes that contain event data and provides a value to use for events that do not include event data. So it's a bit confusing. And provide a value to use for events that do not include event data. So it's a little confusing, but it's I think it's basically a base class that's going to basically help get the data sent back from the control and back to the GUI, basically. It's going to get the data from the package, make sure all the data is being transferred. Understanding this code, this class itself will be complicated right now, so just know for now that we know that it represents the base class for classes that contain event data. We're using event data for our mouse click, therefore we need to use the parameter event args, which is a class. We were naming our event args object, in this case E. So hopefully that makes sense. We could have named this event. We'll go with E. Microsoft goes with E. You can name sender or E, or this method name, whatever you want. Okay, so that's the hard stuff. We'll get into object, event args, these things, the variable names basically, or the object names, and the rest of the stuff later on. So don't worry, don't freak out if you don't understand. If you are coming from another programming language, such as Python or Java or something, C, you might understand. So hopefully I'm not confusing anyone and you guys are understanding. So now let's move on to finishing up with, we'll probably have to make this 2 parts. Excuse me, so we have to double click the My Button control in the designer, which we did, which pulled up this code. Sorry, I apologize because my textbook from university didn't explain this stuff yet. It's actually just telling you to do this in the tutorial, and then it's saying we'll come back later. So we're going to get into those definitions later on. into actual detail. We're going to be using them often, so you'll get used to it. So it opens up our code file, which was our event code in our code file, and then we will continue on. So we talked about the mouse click. When the app is running, the user clicks the control, which is the button, which generates the mouse click. In that case, we have to handle the mouse click. In this thing here, we can think of it as a handler. I think it is called an event handler. So we can say that in comments, this is an event handler, which handles the event, which is, yeah, apologize. So this is just it's an event handler that's going to handle the mouse click. Sorry about that, someone was just talking to me. So this is an event handler that's going to handle it's going to handle the mouse click event. So the event handler is going to handle the mouse click event. And then we'll just move on. So hopefully that makes sense. So we'll be understanding more of the event handler code later on. So don't worry about that. So we talked about the name of the method, which is the name of the event handler. Just basically references our My button. So it indicates that the event handler is associated with the My button control. So it just means that it's associated with the button that we named in our GUI. So pretty much you just want to name your controls after you want to name your methods basically after your control. You don't want to call like, for example, this like Windows click, because someone reading the code or you trying to edit the code later on can all be confusing. So just make sure that it refers to your control. So the message button 1_click is the event handler's name. Hopefully I mentioned that. So the code for the event handler is going to go between these braces here, or the square brackets. So we talked about message boxes. So what we're going to do is that we're going to open up a dialog box or a message box. So a message box is a small window, sometimes referred to as a dialog box. So a message box has another name, which is a dialog box. So it can display a message. So we will add the dialog box or the message box. So when the user clicks the OK button, so we'll have another button in our message. I believe the dialog box might actually come with its own predefined button, but if it doesn't, we'll have to add one to the dialog box. So what we can try is this. So we can type in here So basically, if you want to execute a message box in code, I believe you can probably use the designer window, or kind of like the properties window or the toolbox to drag and drop. With the .NET framework provides a method named messagebox.show that you can use in the Visual C# language to display a message. So if you want to execute the messagebox.show method, we just write a statement known as a method call. And we call the method. So all we have to say here is that we want a message box dot. So message box is probably a class. So we're going to call the class, and we're going to say we want to call the show method. And then here we want to type in, so we have the dot operator here. Show is a method. Message box is a class. I believe it's a class. Yeah, it's a class. It says that message box is a class. Show is a method, which takes 2 parameters. Actually, sorry, I think it's probably overloaded, which means that you can take a number of different parameters. For example, in this case, we're just going to pass 1 parameter. We're going to pass a string. So a string is between 2 quotes like this, 2 double quotes. And so here we'll just say, you click the button. End of a statement in C# requires a semicolon, like most languages. We'll just save that. So now if we just try running this, it should work. So just to run it, just click on the play button at the top like I did. Okay, so yeah, it did work. I don't think you can see the actual windows popping up, but it said, so when I clicked the button, another window popped up and it said you click the button. I apologize about not being able to see the GUI. I had a different recording software that actually just had a free trial on it. So that's basically all it does. But that's all you can see at least. But basically it just pops up a window. So basically the same window here. You should be able to see this one on the form. And then when I click the button, another window pops up and says thanks for clicking the button. That's pretty much it. So that's pretty much it. So we will probably just end it there. That should be all the code for the first tutorial. We talked about strings, multiple buttons. Of course, we could have more buttons than one. So on our form we have a line. So the minimize, maximize, and a close, which is standard, is going to come with your form every time. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. In the next tutorial, we'll be going over, what are we going to do here? We maybe add a few things to this form. If not, we'll be moving on to the next tutorial. So thanks for watching, guys. If you guys liked the video, you can like the video and subscribe to the channel for more programming and investing tutorials. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.